just talked to Jimmy Hart yesterday, and he was fine. To have this happen is just horrible.
The wrestling world mourned Hulk Hogan, but the real story of his final moments stayed buried until now. A nurse who was by his side has finally broken her silence, revealing details about his last hours. And let's just say it was more painful than anyone imagined. I've got all the details, let me break it down. The final hours. The morning of July 24, 2025, began like any other summer day in Clearwater, Florida. The sun was already climbing high in the sky, promising another scorching day in the Sunshine State. But inside a beachfront home that had witnessed countless celebrations and family gatherings, a drama was unfolding that would soon capture the attention of millions around the world. At 9:51 a.m., the silence was shattered by the urgent sound of a 911 call being placed. The caller's voice, though not publicly identified, conveyed an urgency that would set into motion a desperate race against time. Emergency services received that fateful call, reporting a cardiac arrest at the home of Terry Jean Bollea, better known to the world as Hulk Hogan. The wrestling legend who had body-slammed giants and captivated audiences for over 4 decades was now facing his most formidable opponent yet, a failing heart that had suddenly betrayed him. Within 5 minutes, at precisely 9:56 a.m., the first responders from Clearwater Fire and Rescue burst through the doors of the Hogan residence, their equipment in hand and their training at the ready. The scene that greeted them was one of controlled chaos. Paramedics immediately began performing CPR on the 71-year-old wrestling icon, their hands rhythmically compressing his chest in a desperate attempt to restart his heart. The man who had once lifted the 520-pound Andre the Giant above his head now lay motionless, his famous physique that had defined an era of professional wrestling offering no defense against this invisible enemy. For over 30 minutes, the paramedics worked tirelessly, refusing to give up on the man who had never given up in the ring. The dispatch audio, later obtained by People magazine, painted a picture of medical professionals pushing themselves to their limits, continuing chest compressions well past the point where many might have called it. At 10:28 a.m., a full 32 minutes after their arrival, CPR was still ongoing as they prepared to transport Hogan to the waiting ambulance. A video that would later circulate on social media, reported by TMZ and Legit.ung, captured the heartbreaking moment as paramedics performed chest compressions while wheeling Hogan toward the ambulance. The image was surreal. The man who had entertained millions with his larger-than-life persona was now fighting for every breath, every heartbeat, as medical professionals worked with unwavering determination to save his life. The journey to Morton Plant Hospital was one of continued medical intervention. Inside the ambulance, paramedics maintained their life-saving efforts, the vehicle's sirens cutting through the morning air as it raced through the streets of Clearwater. By 10:32 a.m., Hogan was being rushed into the emergency department, where a team of hospital staff was already prepared and waiting, having been alerted to the incoming cardiac arrest patient. What happened next inside Morton Plant Hospital remains largely shrouded in the privacy that medical facilities must maintain. The hospital staff, bound by HIPAA regulations and professional ethics, continued their efforts behind closed doors. The emergency room, a place where life and death decisions are made every day, became the setting for Hulk Hogan's final battle. Despite the advanced medical equipment, the expertise of the doctors and nurses, and the continuation of aggressive resuscitation efforts, the outcome was one that would devastate fans worldwide. At 11:17 a.m., after nearly an hour and a half of continuous medical intervention, Hulk Hogan was pronounced dead. The official cause was listed as cardiac arrest, a sudden stopping of the heart that had claimed yet another legend. The Clearwater Police Department, through Major Nate Burnside, would later confirm that there were no signs of foul play or suspicious activity, and that a standard investigation was underway. The news of Hogan's passing would soon spread like wildfire through social media and news outlets, but in those first moments after his death was pronounced, there was only the quiet reality of loss. The hospital staff who had fought so hard to save him now faced the somber task of preparing for what would come next. The man who had seemed invincible in the wrestling ring, who had kicked out of countless 3 counts and risen from the canvas time and time again, had finally met an opponent he could not overcome. The timeline of events that morning reveals the extraordinary lengths to which medical professionals went to save Hulk Hogan's life. While we may never hear from the nurses who attended to him in his final moments, the dedication shown by the first responders paints a picture of medical professionals who understood they were fighting for more than just another patient. They were fighting for a cultural icon icon, whose impact transcended the wrestling ring. The decision to continue CPR for over 30 minutes speaks to both the severity of Hogan's condition and the determination of the medical team. In many cardiac arrest cases, resuscitation efforts are discontinued after 20 minutes if there's no response. The extended effort in Hogan's case suggests that the paramedics may have seen intermittent signs of life, fleeting moments where his heart showed some activity, giving them hope that their efforts might succeed. The first part of Hulk Hogan's final chapter was written in the desperate efforts of paramedics and emergency room staff who refused to give up, who fought with every tool at their disposal to save a life. It's a testament to their dedication that they continued their efforts for so long, treating the wrestling legend with the same determination he had shown throughout his career. But sometimes, even the greatest fights end in defeat, and on that July morning, the wrestling world lost one of its most iconic figures. In the weeks and months leading up to that fateful July morning, a complex web of health concerns, public denials, and private struggles was unfolding around Hulk Hogan. The man who had built his career on projecting an image of invincibility was battling forces that even his legendary persona couldn't overcome. Understanding these final weeks provides crucial context to the tragedy that would unfold at Morton Plant Hospital. The days leading to disaster, warning signs, and denials.
How much pain are you in right now?
That's kind of funny because I had a physical therapist ask me yesterday, if you could be out of pain or you could have a perfect championship walk, what would you rather have? And I said, I'd rather have the walk. She goes, you're out of your mind. I said, yes, I am.
This was an interview with Chris Van Vliet, where Hogan confessed that he's almost always in pain. But even though he was in pain, all the time, Hogan still stated that he'd rather have a championship walk than be out of pain. This was the mentality he had. Thought it was bold. It was the reason he continued deteriorating.
She goes, well, how much pain are you in? I said, well, I'm in pain all the time, but I'm used to it. You know, and my go-to in the morning just to get me rolling is 2 cups of coffee and 2 Tylenols, and then that's it.
The tragic story continued in May 2025 when Hogan underwent a significant medical procedure, a 4-level anterior cervical discectomy and fusion, ACDF. This wasn't just any surgery. It was a major spinal fusion operation that his representatives initially described as successful.
From the back being fused?
Yeah, the back and
how many discs are fused?
Everything's fused.
The whole back.
I've had 10 back surgeries, but...
For a man who had endured over 25 surgeries in the past decade, including 10 back surgeries and replacements of both knees and hips, this was yet another attempt to manage the cumulative damage from a career built on physical punishment. The public narrative surrounding Hogan's recovery was decidedly optimistic. On June 18, 2025, his representative told E! News there was no reason to panic, emphasizing the success of the neck surgery. This message of reassurance would become a recurring theme in the weeks to follow, even as whispers of more serious health issues began to circulate within wrestling circles. The situation took a dramatic turn when Florida radio host Bubba the Love Sponge, Hogan's former best friend of 15 years, began making alarming claims on his radio show. Bubba reported that Hogan had spent 6 weeks in the intensive care unit and was on his deathbed. These claims sent shockwaves through the wrestling community and sparked what would become a fierce battle of narratives between those claiming to know the truth about Hogan's condition. 3 days before Hogan's death, Bubba's co-host Lummy made even more disturbing claims, stating that Hogan could no longer speak and was confined to a hospital bed at home. The image painted was of a man in severe decline, far removed from the optimistic updates being provided by his inner circle. However, Hogan's family and close friends vehemently denied these reports. On July 11, 2025, Sky Daily, Hogan's wife, took to Instagram to address the rumors directly. In a detailed post, she insisted that her husband's heart was strong and that there was no brain damage or oxygen deprivation. She described the reports of him being in a coma as completely false, painting a picture of a man recovering well from his recent surgery. Just 2 days before Hogan's death, on July 22, 2025, his former manager and close friend Jimmy Hart tweeted that Hogan was doing great, doing phenomenal, after spending time with Hogan's son, Nick. This tweet, which Hart would later delete, stood in stark contrast to the dire warnings coming from Bubba's camp. Hart's optimism seemed genuine, and his shock at Hogan's death just 48 hours later would be palpable and heartbreaking. The conflicting narratives created a confusing picture for fans and media alike. On one side stood Bubba the Love Sponge, insisting that he was the only one telling the truth about his former friend's deteriorating condition. On the other side stood Hogan's family and inner circle, maintaining that while he was recovering from surgery, there was no immediate danger. This battle of narratives would take on a bitter tone after Hogan's death, with Bubba claiming vindication for his warnings. What we now know, thanks to sources close to the family who spoke to the Daily Mail mail after Hogan's death is that the truth lay somewhere in between these extremes. In his final weeks, Hogan was indeed suffering from what was described as a very weak heart. He was experiencing shortness of breath, chronic fatigue, and significant weight loss. The image that emerges is of a man whose body was finally succumbing to decades of punishment, steroid use, and the accumulated effects of numerous surgeries. The role of Hogan's May 2025 spinal fusion surgery in his decline cannot be overlooked. Medical research has shown that spinal fusion surgery carries increased risks for patients with pre-existing heart conditions. The stress of such a major operation on an already weakened cardiovascular system may have been a contributing factor to the cardiac event that would ultimately claim his life. Adding to the complexity of the situation was Hogan's own tendency to downplay his health issues publicly. Throughout his career, he had cultivated an image of invincibility, and admitting weakness went against every instinct he had developed over decades in the public eye. Friends reported that even when he was clearly struggling, Hogan would put on a brave face for public appearances, attending fan events despite obvious discomfort. The disconnect between public statements and private reality became even more apparent when Jimmy Hart revealed that on the night of July 23, 2025, he had called to check on Hogan. Unable to speak directly with his friend, Hart spoke instead with Hogan's assistant, who assured him that Hogan was doing great. Hart asked the assistant to tell Hogan, "I love him," not knowing these would be his final words to his longtime friend. The next morning, Hogan would be found in cardiac arrest. The tragedy of these final weeks lies not just in the loss of a wrestling legend, but in the confusion and conflict that surrounded his decline. Were the optimistic updates from his family an attempt to maintain privacy and dignity? Were they genuinely unaware of how serious his condition had become? Or was there an element of denial, a refusal to accept that the larger-than-life Hulk Hogan could be brought down by something as mundane as a failing heart? Following Hogan's death, Bubba the Love Sponge would go on his radio show to express both vindication and regret. "I wish to God I wasn't right, because being right means we have a dead Hulk Hogan," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. He called out those who had denied his reports, including Sky Daily, Jimmy Hart, and others, suggesting they had been lying about Hogan's condition. The medical reality that emerges from these conflicting accounts is sobering. Hogan's body, which had been subjected to decades of steroid use, as he himself admitted during the 1994 McMahon trial, was breaking down. The combination of a weak heart, recent major surgery, and the cumulative effects of a punishing career created a perfect storm of health issues. The warning signs were there for those willing to see them: the shortness of breath, the fatigue, the weight loss, all classic symptoms of cardiac distress. The pattern of public denials versus private reality in Hogan's final weeks reflects a deeper issue within the wrestling community: the culture of toughness that often prevents performers from acknowledging their vulnerabilities. Hogan's history included admitting to using steroids for 14 years, from the late 1970s to early 1990s, a practice that research has definitively linked to increased cardiovascular risks, including acute myocardial infarction and heart failure. The toll of Hogan's career was written across his medical history. Those 25 surgeries in the last decade weren't just numbers. Each represented a trauma to his body, a recovery period where his system was stressed, and an accumulation of scar tissue and physical compromise. The spinal fusion surgery in May 2025 was particularly significant. Medical literature indicates that major spinal surgery in patients over 70 with pre-existing cardiovascular conditions carries substantial risks, including increased strain on the heart during recovery. Bubba the Love Sponge's emotional radio show following Hogan's death revealed the depth of his frustration. "I can't take away from what I've already said and what I've already correctly predicted, but I am officially the guy that was the only one telling the truth about Hulk Hogan's physical condition," he stated, his voice breaking with emotion. The fact that someone who had known Hogan for 15 years felt compelled to go public with his concerns, despite the backlash he faced, suggests he genuinely believed his friend's life was in danger. The tragedy is compounded by the missed opportunities for intervention. Had Hogan's true condition been acknowledged earlier, perhaps different medical decisions could have been made. Perhaps the warning signs could have prompted more aggressive cardiac monitoring or preventive measures. Yet throughout it all, the man himself remained largely silent about his struggles. There are no records of Hogan publicly acknowledging the severity of his condition in those final weeks. Whether this was pride, denial, or simply a desire to protect his legacy, we may never know. What we do know is that when the end came, it came suddenly, transforming what some believed was a recovery period into a tragedy that would shock the wrestling world. The silence from Morton Plant Hospital on July 24, 2025, marked not just the end of Terry Jean Bollea's life, but the closing chapter of one of professional wrestling's most transformative figures. The legacy Hulk Hogan left behind speaks louder than any deathbed revelation ever could. His impact on professional wrestling, popular culture, and the entertainment industry as a whole whole, created ripples that continue to shape the world of sports entertainment today. The Immortal Legacy, how Hulkamania changed everything. Hulk Hogan's transformation of professional wrestling began with a single moment on January 23, 1984, when he defeated the Iron Sheik at Madison Square Garden to win the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. This wasn't just a title change, it was the birth of a phenomenon. Gorilla Monsoon's famous declaration, "Hulkamania is here," during that match would prove prophetic beyond anyone's wildest imagination. What followed was a cultural revolution that took wrestling from smoky arenas and regional television to the mainstream consciousness of America and beyond. The numbers tell only part of the story. Hogan headlined 8 of the first 9 WrestleMania events, with WrestleMania 3 in 1987 drawing 93,173 fans to the Pontiac Silverdome. But beyond the attendance figures and pay-per-view buy rates, Hogan fundamentally changed what it meant to be a professional wrestler. He wasn't just an athlete or a performer, he was a brand, a multimedia sensation who understood that success in wrestling meant success everywhere. The rock and wrestling connection of the mid-1980s, spearheaded by Hogan's crossover appeal, integrated wrestling with MTV and pop music in ways that seemed impossible before. His appearances on Saturday Night Live, his CBS cartoon Hulk Hogan's Rock, and wrestling, and his presence on magazine covers from Sports Illustrated to TV Guide made him arguably the most recognizable athlete in America during the 1980s. He wasn't just selling wrestling, he was selling an entire lifestyle built around training, prayers, and vitamins. Dave Meltzer, wrestling's most respected historian, once stated, "You can't possibly overrate his significance in the history of the business, and he sold more tickets to wrestling shows than any man who ever lived." This isn't hyperbole, it's a mathematical fact. Hogan's ability to draw crowds transcended traditional wrestling demographics. Children who had never watched wrestling begged their parents for Hulkamania merchandise. Adults who dismissed wrestling as fake found themselves captivated by Hogan's charisma. But Hogan's legacy extends beyond just his first run with WWE. His shocking heel turn at WCW's Bash at the Beach on July 7, 1996, when he formed the New World Order with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, proved that even at 42, he could reinvent himself completely. The transformation from the all-American hero to Hollywood Hulk Hogan wasn't just a character change, it was a seismic shift that helped WCW dominate WE in television ratings for 83 consecutive weeks. This period, known as the Monday Night Wars, pushed both companies to new creative heights and proved that Hogan's drawing power wasn't limited to his heroic persona. The influence of Hogan's career path can be seen in every major wrestling star who followed. When The Rock spoke emotionally about Hogan following his death, he recalled their WrestleMania X8 match and a childhood memory of Hogan gifting him a headband.
It's not Bundy. You ain't Kamala. Remember Kamala? Rubbing his belly.
The Rock's own career trajectory, from wrestling to Hollywood megastardom, follows a blueprint that Hogan established decades earlier. John Cena, another wrestler who achieved mainstream success, directly credits Hogan's influence. Even current WWE stars understand that the path from wrestler to entertainment icon was first paved by Hulkamania. The modern WWE's emphasis on creating larger-than-life personalities rather than just skilled wrestlers stems directly from the success of Hogan's character-first approach. Yet Hogan's legacy is undeniably complicated by controversies that tarnished his image in his later years. The 2015 revelation of racist remarks from a 2007 recording led to his temporary removal from the WWE Hall of Fame and widespread condemnation. His political involvement, particularly his support for Donald Trump at the 2024 Republican National Convention, further divided public opinion. These controversies ensure that any discussion of Hogan's legacy must acknowledge both his transformative impact and his personal failings. Perhaps most tellingly, even in death, Hogan's influence on the wrestling business was evident.
The match with Shaquille O'Neal as special referee, and then Halloween Havoc were Tommy Hearns, Muhammad Ali, Sherry Martel. I mean, they're never going to be called classics, but they drew money, and we drew money.
His passing prompted tributes from across the wrestling world, with Ric Flair calling him a close friend and revealing that Hogan had once lent him money for his son's rehab, refusing repayment.
The one thing that I said it publicly at the Garden one night, my son went to 6 rehabs, and my insurance didn't cover rehab, so Hulk lent me money one time to keep him in rehab and keep him off life support. So I've never forgotten that. And I went to pay him back, and he said, You never have to pay me back. I'm here for you.
Triple H credited him as a larger-than-life figure and a global sensation, while Sting called him the greatest of all. Even those who had complicated relationships with Hogan acknowledged his unparalleled impact on their industry. The economics of Hogan's legacy are staggering. His merchandise sales in the 1980s revolutionized wrestling's business model, proving that the real money wasn't just in ticket sales, but in licensing and merchandising. Every wrestling t-shirt sold today, every action figure, every piece of branded merchandise owes its existence to the trail Hogan blazed. Modern WWE's transformation into a publicly traded company worth billions can be traced back to the foundation Hogan helped build. His influence extended internationally as well. Hogan's success in Japan, where he won the inaugural IWGP League tournament in 1983, helped establish the template for American wrestlers succeeding overseas. His matches in Japan drew massive crowds and proved that wrestling's appeal could transcend language and cultural barriers when the right personality was involved. The personal side of Hogan's legacy is perhaps best exemplified by his status as the most requested celebrity for the Make-A-Wish Foundation during the 1980s. For countless children facing life-threatening illnesses, meeting Hulk Hogan represented hope and joy in their darkest moments. These interactions away from cameras and publicity revealed a man who understood the responsibility that came with his fame. Yet the complexities of his character were evident even in his family relationships. His daughter Brooke remained estranged at the time of his death, citing long-term verbal and mental abuse, though their last conversation in September 2023 saw her express love and concern for his health. This estrangement serves as a reminder that even the largest personalities cast shadows, and that public personas often mask private struggles. As wrestling continues to evolve in the post-Hogan era, his influence remains inescapable. Every wrestler who dreams of mainstream success, every promoter who envisions wrestling as entertainment rather than just sport, every fan who sees wrestling as larger than life, they all exist in a world that Hulk Hogan helped create. The silence from Morton Plant Hospital about his final moments seems fitting in retrospect. After a life lived so publicly, perhaps Hogan deserved the dignity of a private death. The man who told millions of Hulkamaniacs to train, say their prayers, and eat their vitamins left behind a legacy that defies simple categorization. He was a hero to millions and a disappointment to others. He revolutionized an industry while sometimes holding others back. He broke barriers while sometimes reinforcing others. In the end, Hulk Hogan's legacy is as complex as the man himself, impossible to ignore, difficult to fully embrace, but absolutely essential to understanding how professional wrestling became the global phenomenon it is today. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.